Hey guys, what is going on? It's Sven here again. So someone suggested that in my previous tutorial about unwrapping this particular model, I said that the model was really bad and ideally would really want to remodel it. And they suggested that I should do that tutorial and people would benefit from it, from taking a mesh that is kind of bad to something that is a lot more usable. Now, one thing to note that you won't get it exactly the same as your reference because everyone's artistic style is a little bit different. We're going to get it as close as possible, but that being said, let's get started. So one of the things is, with this mesh, you could actually go through and delete certain points to make them quads. For example, if we take this section here, and if we remove that by dissolving it, you see we get 1, 2, 3, and 4. We can do the same with this section here. And we can do the same with this section here. And we can go through and we could do that with each and every single section of this geometry. Now, one of the problems of doing that is we're going to end up where we're going to have some really uneven polygons which aren't particularly good. So you might as well just go and remodel it from the start. And that's exactly what we're going to do with this model. We're going to remodel it. So looking at this, the shape that we could particularly use would be a cube. So it's always decent to start off with a very similar primitive, which is in this menu here. It just makes it a lot easier to model with. So we're going to start off with a cube, and we're going to reduce this down to maybe 2 by 2 by 2. And I'm only going 2 by 2 by 2 just to get it small enough so I can use the handles to manually place it and basically just line it up as best as possible. I want something roughly the same, but not 100% the same. So that looks okay. So I'm going to move it here and just increase the width here. And we're kind of just blocking in the general shape of this so far. So something like that looks okay to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some segments as well because we're definitely going to need them. So I'm going to add 2 segments here. I'm actually going to add 4 segments, which will give us 3 lines. I'm also going to add on the Y just 1 segment. That's just to even out the distribution of polygons. And then I'm going to add some on the Y. I'm going to add 4 as well. So I'm going to press C to make this editable, and I'm also going to give it a special material just so I can see the differences. And I'm also going to put the reference material on this X-ray mode just so we can see through it. The one I want to see the most is the model we're going to be working on, which is this one. So I'm going to go up here to the live selection. I'm going to grab the rectangle selection, and I'm going to go to points and make sure only visible select elements is off. Because what I want to do is when I go to my top, side and front views, that I'm able to grab these points and adjust them with the scale tool. So I want to scale some of these out, and again I'm using spacebar to jump back and forth from my 2 previous tools. Just makes it a lot faster. So spacebar every time. So I'm going to press spacebar now to go back to the scale tool, scale them in slightly. Spacebar again to go back to the live selection, and then vice versa. You just want to go back and forth with these. Now with these ones, we're going to bring these in, and then we're going to grab these 3 and bring them out, and then the middle one and bring that fully out. So what we technically have here is a very nice little curve in our mesh, and this is exactly what we want. So we've got a very nice slight curve. This is looking pretty decent. And one thing I might want to do is just adjust these points a tiny bit. And it's going to be these 2 here. So I'm going to move them back a little bit, and then I'm going to scale them out. And the reason we're doing this is because we want this section here, which is a quad, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4. We want it to be evenly spaced as possible, because when you've got an angle like this, it can cause problems if they're too far in. You're going to get some really weird shading like you see over here on the opposite side. So you do want to have at least a bit of an angle to them. So now that we've got that, it's looking pretty good. So what we can do is we can adjust the underneath, because that's going to be the main focus right now. So what I want to do is turn off the teeth to start off with. So I'm going to hide the teeth just to make it a little bit easier to see what we're doing. So as you can see, this bottom section does require a little bit of adjusting. So that's fine. We can go into the side view, we can grab the points on the cube, and we can just bring these down slightly, just to give the illusion that it's kind of at an angle, and that's kind of what we want. Just a very nice subtle action, and bring these down. Something like that. Now that we've done that, we want to do this section underneath. And it can be a little bit hard to see, so you can put it on X-ray if you want. It can get a bit complicated with the amount of lines, so you can turn off the X-ray on the other one so we can see. And what we want to really do is kind of get this inset. So I'm actually going to turn off X-ray because it's just a little bit confusing for me, but maybe it will help you. So what we want to do is grab the polygon tool and grab the live selection tool, and then we want to grab some of these polygons here. Actually, we want to grab all of them on the bottom side. What we're going to do now is we're going to right click and go to extrude inner. I'm going to bring these in to about there. Now one thing you will have to do is go back to point mode and slightly adjust these, which we want to adjust them on the red and blue axes. We don't want to affect the what's it called, the y-axis at all, because we don't want to move this up or down yet. So we're kind of just evening them out, bringing these around, just trying to get a general curve for this. And if you don't adjust them now, it's going to be a lot harder later on. And that looks pretty cool actually. So now that we've got that, what we want to do is I'm actually just going to turn off the specular on this model, just so I can see it a little bit better. What I want to do now is kind of imagine this section here that isn't highlighted is going to be the gum section. So we want to bring this section up, and to do that we can just drag it up like this. But if we drag it up, we're going to get some problems, and the problem is that it's going to drag this section here, which we kind of want to keep. So all we need to do is do another extrude inner just slightly, and then we can just drag this up. And we can also use the scale tools to scale this in, so we get the type of look that we want. And if I just turn off this section, you can see this is kind of what we get, which looks pretty good. So something like that looks relatively decent, and all the points, you know, are decently even. Some are obviously bigger than others, which again you can adjust if you want. Grab some of these and just pull them down, just to try and even them out a tiny bit. And what we need to do is add a hypernerves onto this, so we can kind of see what it looks like. And so far it looks pretty cool. What we need to do now is we need to adjust the back section here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the points section, and I want to just grab these sections at the back, and I want to pull these up. Now in order to do that, I also need to grab these to pull these up as well. And the reason we need to pull the second layer up is simply because if we're getting closer and closer to the top, these need to be moved up, or they're just going to start overlapping. So something like that. So if I turn off the hypernerves, we can getting this this section at the back which is going up. I'm just going to go to the font angle and reduce this down to 20, and that will allow us to see any really bad sections, which here looks like one, but let's just have a look, and we can just adjust this a little bit. Maybe we want to pull this down. Nope. So we've got a section here. Maybe it's just the way the lighting is. Not quite sure. Can maybe grab these and pull them in or out. And this section we can pull it in. There we go. We're kind of getting rid of that weird shading now. So we just need to do some little adjustments in order to fix these. And maybe move that up a little bit. So that looks okay. Okay, so let's move on, because we don't want to dawdle on the small things just yet. We want to get the overall shape right now, which is looking pretty cool. I'm using Q to toggle on and off the hypernerbs, just in case you were wondering. And then what we want to do now is bring back the original. I want to duplicate actually, just the one, and turn off the original and just bring the other one to the side, because we need a reference that we can really see, and it's going to be this one. So I'm going to turn off the X-ray. So this is what we have so far. Now these don't really look that similar. Even if we put on this, they don't look particularly similar, and the reason is because this one has I wouldn't say a lot of detail, but it has detail in the right places, which is basically saying a teeth or a tooth is going to be in this section, and it's going to look like it's going into the gums. Now we can't really do that until we actually model a tooth, but what we can do is give a little bit of detail, a little bit of distortion to this actual mesh to make it look like gums, which are particularly smooth. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to grab our original model here, and we're going to add some more subdivisions to it. So I'm going to grab all of these, and I'm going to right click and go down to subdivide, and I want to subdivide it one time, and this is what we're going to get. Now because we've got all these polygons here, what we're able to do now is we're able to adjust it by right clicking and going to brush. Now in the brush we want to change the strength to maybe 30, and the radius down to, depending on how big your model is, we're going to go with a 1 here, and we're going to change it to normal. So what we want to do now is we can go around the model and use Control to dig into the mesh, and we can use just the normal click without any keys held down to give us a pull effect, which is really important. And some of these areas might be a little bit bulky, like this might be a little bit too in depth, so what you can do is just add some volume in here, and you can use shift as well to smooth it out, which is also pretty cool. So it's just going to take a little bit of practice to use this, and we want to get this section down here, and it's looking pretty cool. And we can smooth it out, and if it's a little bit too heavy, because I'm using a mouse, I can go down to 10% and just give some very slight detail to this. So now if we look at this without the ground shading on, you can see we're getting a really different look, and it's not looking as perfect as it once was, which is nice. So we can smooth out this area here as well if we don't want that to be affected, and smooth out some of this section. And yeah, so that looks pretty cool. We want to bring some of these points up, maybe they're a little bit too low. And it's all just about artisticness, because you know, technically you're not really doing anything much here except for pulling and pushing points. but the fact that this is going to give you so much detail is really the point of it, and you're not really changing points manually using a brush, which, you know, if you take off the wireframing, can look a little bit weird, but what you're doing is modeling to a hypernerves. Now if I go to the hypernerves and reduce this down to 1, it's looking a little bit weird now because the thong shading is down, but if we increase this, you can see they look relatively similar, except this one has a lot of jagged edges. Now there's a lot more you can do to this once you have the teeth in place, but until you have the teeth in place, then you won't be able to finish it. So I'm going to say that section is done right now, and what I'm going to do now is move on to the tooth. So I'm going to hide these because we don't really need to see them, and on this preview one over here, I'm going to hide the actual mesh, the body of the mesh, and unhide the teeth, and this is going to be our reference. However, we're also going to do the same here. We're going to hide the main body and unhide the teeth, and then unhide the actual section here, and then we're going to use this as a model reference, and this one's going to be one where we can actually see what it is. This one's we're going to be modeling over. So again, let's grab a cube. I'm going to bring this one down to 2 by 2 by 2, and we're going to grab this and bring it in. I'm going to model one of the teeth here. Now one thing to note is these teeth have 8 on each side, which is a total of 16, and they are literally the same on both sides. So if you just want to model one half, you can actually do that and then just mirror them across. It will save you a ton of time, because doing this isn't going to be easy. It's going to take you a while, but it's well worth it. So what I'm going to do on this section here is I'm going to go into the polygon mode, go into live selection and select these. I'm going to go up to selection, rip off the menu and bash grow selection a bunch of times. And the reason I want to do this, like I did in my previous tutorial, is because I want to add this to a set selection, which then I can hide the teeth and bring back just that one tooth, and that will allow me to model in a much easier way. So I'm going to hide the reference just for now. And with this cube, I want to go into point mode, which isn't going to make a difference right now because it still isn't editable. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this one segment on each side. So if I go into the lines, you can see we're going to get this crisscross, which is what we want. So I'm going to hit C to make this editable. And then I'm going to go into the front view here, and I'm going to grab the rectangle selection, and I'm just going to adjust these points like so. And if some scaling is required, we're going to scale and scale these out like so. And I'm going to go into the side view and do the exact same thing. We're going to grab these and we're going to move them back. We're going to rotate them so they're in the correct orientation, and again move them. And then for this one here, we're going to grab the bottom one and we're going to scale them in, and then we're going to move them like so. And then I can grab each individual section and just move it ever so slightly to kind of match up what we're trying to accomplish here. And that is basically just blocking out this section. So some sections will require a little bit more definition, if you like, so that means more polygons, such as down this section here and across this section here. So to do that, just need to right click, go to knife, uncheck visible only, and just do a big slice across there and a slice across there. Then we can actually grab these points and move them out into the direction that we need that definition or the more detail to be, and we can move these up just to even them out as much as possible, because the whole point here is to have even polygons, or at least as much as possible. So that's what we've got so far, which looks a little bit weird, but trust me, it does get better. So that being said, this section here looks a little bit weird. So what we can do is start going into the perspective mode now by using live selection, and grabbing these points and just moving them in until the geometry starts to intersect. Can move it back, and we're kind of just trying to mold it to the original shape. And sometimes you're not going to get exact, but you're going to get something similar, which is nice. So I'm going to go down here and drag these back. I'm going to grab this section here and move it back out. Grab these two, move them out slightly, move that in and back out. And this is what we want to do, just go around and try and fill in these sections like so, which looks pretty cool. This one here could be moved in quite a lot. There we go. So what we're trying to accomplish right now is an overall smoothness of these. Because if you look at this side, the points started out pretty much even like this, and now they're slightly going in at certain edges, and that's to accommodate for the roundness of the tooth. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because we're going to adjust this in the same manner we did with the actual gum section. So we can bring these in. It just takes a little bit of time. Modeling isn't a walk in the park. It does require dedication and time. And that's why I don't do many modeling tutorials, simply because they are going to be very long tutorials, or at least split up into several tutorial parts, or part 1, 2, 3, etc. So, you know, I'm not a big fan of that type of thing. But if it's something you guys would be interested in seeing, then by all means, I will do it if you guys require it. So that's looking pretty good so far. And what we can do now is just adjust this last side, and then we can add in a hypernerves to kind of see what this is going to look like. So add in the hypernerves, and we can see it's looking relatively decent. So what we can do is grab some specific points and maybe just bring these out or bring them in, because what we're trying to accomplish is something of a very, very similar structure. So if this requires to go in a little bit, then by all means. But if you want your teeth to look a little bit different, then by all means have your teeth looking a little bit different. For me, that's looking really, really good so far, which I'm quite happy with. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn off the hypernerves, and we're going to fix the top first. So I'm going to grab the polygons on the top, and I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to extrude them out like by a very small amount, and then I'm going to extrude inner by also a very small amount, like that. Maybe a little bit less than that actually, maybe a 0.1. And then the reason I do that is because when we had the hypernerves back on, it's going to give us a very nice hard edge at the top, and that's going to give us the illusion that this is a very sharp edge at the top, which you're not going to see, but it kind of gives us that feel that the tooth is smooth from there down. I don't know, just I'm looking at teeth reference, and that's kind of how I'm trying to describe it, I guess. So the top really doesn't matter because it's going to go into the gums. However, if you are modeling a tooth to see completely, then we've missed a big part out, which is the root section, the root canal, where the root goes into your tooth, I guess. But yeah, so what we can do now is we can do the same as we wanted to do with the actual gums. So I'm going to reduce this down. Now you've got two options here. Option one being that you can click on the tooth and do what we did before, which is basically subdivide the entire thing. It's up to you if you want to do that. I think I might, just to get a bit more geometry in here. However, I would suggest not subdividing it after you've added these edges in, because you're just going to get a bunch of edges in here that just aren't necessary. So I'm going to use UL and on the lines, and I want to just get rid of a few of these lines here that I don't need. So I'm just going to dissolve them, just because we don't actually need them. It's just a little bit extra geometry that we do not need. So now that we've got that, we can enable the smooth of the hyperNURBs, and you could do what we did before by right clicking when you're in points mode or whatever, and being on your cube would help. And then you could go into the brush and you could just do the same. You could bring some of these in, you could bring them out. One of the things you need to do is at the back you need to bring in this section. So I'm just going to go 0.3 for this, and we kind of just want this section to be pulled in, so I'm going to increase the strength. And this is kind of how teeth are at the back. They're kind of indented, if you like. And we can just smooth out this area here as well, and reduce the strength just a little bit so we're not going a little bit crazy. And bring some of these points out, bring some of them in, and just get a little bit creative. If this is a little bit too much, you can bring it out, of course, kind of even that out, and bring some of this in, and we could smooth this out a little bit, I think. Bring this section out. And believe it or not, I already filmed this tutorial, but Camtasia was being a pain and it lost the file, which I'm not particularly happy about, but oh well. So there we go, we've got our tooth, and we can go back to the display and put it on ground, and this is pretty much our tooth. So what we can do now is unhide the actual mouth section, and we can unhide this section here, and then we can just vice versa these, so unhide all of them and just hide the original. And then what we can do is, that looks pretty good actually, but what I would like to do is I would like to bring the gums up just a tiny bit, because it looks like, actually I don't know, they kind of look perfect to me, but maybe just a little bit like that. And if we give this the same color as orange, would you really know that this was remodeled? I don't think you would. I don't think you can tell it's been remodeled, to be honest. And they look very similar. You know, one has jagged edges, and that's simply because of the thong. But if we increase the thong to 180, you know, you can't really tell much of a difference. This does have a bit of a sharper edge. You can do that quite easily. But yeah, I mean, overall, that's pretty much what you would do. And if we render this out, you can see, if we actually just unhide, let's see, we want to unhide that, and then we can restore selection, delete that, and just optimize it, then render that out. And as you can see, it looks pretty cool. Again, let me just unhide that, restore selection, and just delete that. So yeah, I mean, that is pretty much how you would do it. If we bring back this and unhide that, so these are the two teeth side by side. Let's give it the same color, just because we would want to, and render that out. So yeah, I mean, it isn't particularly hard or complicated to remodel something. You just want to keep in mind that you want to keep it as quadded as possible, and you kind of want to, once you've got everything in place, then that's when you can add like the final detailing, such as with this section here, you can grab the sections in between the teeth and you can pull them down if that's kind of what you wanted, and then the sections in between you can pull them up, and so on and so forth. You know, it really is down to the detail. And so once you've got the base done, you know, it's pretty cool. So let's just go to objects and object information. So you can see here, this object alone just has 384 polygons in this section. If we go to this one over here and go to object information, you can see that there's a really big difference in polygon count. So 300 to 6,000 is quite a lot. And same with the tooth as well. If we go to the tooth and go to project information, you can see there's 192 here, which is pretty decent. You might not even have to go that high depending on if you add subdivisions to it. You could just have it as low poly and go from there really. But that's not too bad. And even without the hypernerves on, this stuff should still look relatively decent. You know, it's not looking too bad. And the problem is, if you added hypernerves to this, it would look okay, but you know, realistically, it's full of glitchiness. And like down here, you can see there's a lot of glitchiness here, which just isn't good. But again, you can get the same effect with like the gums just by modeling that in. We actually didn't do it on this section, but again, you could just go in and grab these and just move them up to kind of get that feel, that look. And you know, it's not particularly hard once you kind of understand how to do it. So if you grab these and move these up, you can get a very similar result to what you had before, which is kind of nice. But yeah, so guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope this helped you out, and if you've got any more suggestions on tutorials or anything you want to see, let me know in a PM, and I will see what I can do for you guys. So if you did enjoy the video, please make sure you subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next tutorial. Peace.